Hi guys, and welcome to this digital paint tutorial where we will be going over landscape elements. In this tutorial, I will be showing you how to paint specifically one element in great detail. The reason why I've decided to do this is I know I'm not the only artist out there who gets easily overwhelmed by the size of a project. We look at a whole landscape and we think, how in the world could I possibly create that entire piece? So I'm going to break down different elements of landscapes so that we can all slowly build on a landscape and learn together. So right now I'm just taking a very, very, very dark green and it's a hard airbrush and I'm just filling it in. Yes, there was probably a faster way to fill it in, but I really wanted to hand draw it this time. I'm just getting down sort of a couple shapes that I think will make a good rock as I add other colors and textures. Next, I'm going to go in with a slightly olive green. I'm going to take the opacity down and just sort of box in some shapes. By blocking in these different shapes with this color, what we're actually doing is helping our eyes start to see the different faces and different places in which the light would hit the surface of the rock. And in that, then we can start to see where, there would be shadow and where moss would grow depending on our light source. Once I have the first layer of this established, I'm going to grab the color from the back, the very, very dark green, and I'm going to use the same brush, keep the opacity of that brush down, and I'm just going to darken up some of the areas where naturally there would be shadow. And this may take a moment. I'm just lightly tapping in and trying to not get rid of the color, but just lighten it, lessen the intensity. I think I overdid it, if I'm being honest, but I end up painting over it, so it turns out in the end just fine. I try really hard not to be too much of a perfectionist, which is an old habit of mine. But perfection is not achievable because it doesn't exist. But what I can do is focus on improvement. All right, and I'm going into the organic brush set that comes with Procreate. I'm going to the cotton brush and I'm just making some adjustments to the jitter as well as the spacing. I find that it creates a really nice sort of base texture for moss, also for tree leaves. It can also, depending on the type of grass that you're painting, it can also be a great base for grass as well. And yes, you can still see the hard edge of the rock underneath it. I'm not going to worry about that because, again, we're just going to keep building layer on layer on layer. So if it becomes an issue later, we'll deal with it, but we're not going to get too hyper-focused on it looking perfect just yet. We're not doing it right full render from the beginning. We slowly and gradually render it over time. So I'm just putting the moss down in the places that I feel it would be likely growing based on the sunlight and where the sunlight would be hitting the moss, so that as we build up color, we now have the base color down. I know, this part's so exhilarating. So fun. All right, so now we're going to go in with a lighter color and we're going to go up to the rainforest brush. I do have this one here. It is altered. I just duplicated the original so that I can mess around with it. And I just made the spacing more prevalent and the jitter as well. I actually, at some point during the video, I don't think it's till closer to the end, I really didn't like the way that the jitter was working on the brush, so I went in and adjusted it. Know that no matter how much you plan, no matter how seasoned of an artist you are, exploration is just part of growth. So even though I fully planned this, I knew what I was executing and how I wanted it to look, I just over time realized, you know what, I can get something better out of this brush. As you're putting in this moss texture and building up on the colors, make sure that you are leaving space for shadow. You don't want the colors to be overlapping so much that you lose the different colors beneath it and that you lose the shadow. What makes it look real is the randomness. It is the spontaneity of the moss because nature is organic and it typically has some pleasant surprises and unexpectedness to it. So we want it to be as, natural looking as absolutely possible. So once I have this down, I'm actually going to use the smudge tool. And I'm going to go into the artistic brush set that comes with the Procreate app, and I'm going to choose the leatherwood. I like leatherwood a lot for smudging greenery. It creates some really nice texture and, still keeps sort of like a leaf-like shape going where I've painted. So that's always a good one for me if you're looking to sort of smudge out some harsh lines. Leatherwood is always a good option. We are about 6 minutes into this video. If you're still here, thank you so much for supporting my channel and, for hanging out with me today. Please make sure that you subscribe if you haven't already. Give this a thumbs up if you liked it. And of course, feel free to comment and engage. If you have any questions, suggestions, I would love to hear them. In a moment, when I'm done tapping in these colors for the moss, I'm going to add a layer above the rock, but beneath the moss, and I'm going to grab like a greenish gray, something that's lighter than the background color, and I'm going to grab the organic brush called Mountain Ash. And I'm using that to just reestablish some of the shapes of the rocks, the rock faces, if you will. And then I'm going to go in with the clay, I think it is. Let me double check. Yeah, clay. And I'm going to use the dark texture and just tap it in just to, make sure that I'm keeping the rough texture of rock present. And it's very subtle. Now I'm going to go back to the rainforest brush that I created, and I'm going to start tapping in even lighter and brighter green on the top where my light source would be. With each added layer with the lighter greens as we go, you're going to see less and less of that color, right? Think of the first base coat that we put down of that color with the cotton brush. We put it all over in a lot of different places. And now with each layer that we do, the lighter that we get with each green, we're tapping in less and less of that color. We don't want to have the high saturated colors to be overpowering. I'm going in again and I'm doing the smudge tool with the leatherwood to sort of help take out the harshness of some of the paint that I just put down. Sorry, I don't have much to say. Here we go. So this is where I started to play with the jitter a bit, as well as the size, but mostly the jitter, because I really wasn't liking the function of that brush. And I'm sure you guys have heard the saying, trust the process, but I feel like if you look at where we are now versus where we were about 10 minutes ago, 9 minutes ago, it's quite a big difference. And I know in the beginning when we start a piece, it can be kind of overwhelming and discouraging. At least for me, a lot of my hesitation as an artist has come from just feeling like, how am I supposed to get from point A to point Z? And they just feel so far apart that it would prevent me from even trying sometimes. So as you're building your project, take a moment, pause to appreciate where it started versus where you're at. So now I wouldn't say softening up the edges, but I'm creating some textured edges so that they aren't so blunt and sleek like perfect. And then once I have that done, I'm actually going to start painting some rocks on the underside that I didn't paint in at the beginning yet. So I'm putting a layer underneath the main rock, the first rock layer. And I'm just going to take that cotton brush and just paint in that dark underside. And then I'm going to go in with the smudge tool and just sort of get the edges to look the way that I want them to. Again, I want them to have texture, but I don't want it to be too soft of a textured edge. So I'm using the smudge tool with that leather wood brush again. All right, and on top of that layer now, I am going to start putting in, I'm going to use the clay brush and I'm going to start putting in just a little bit of texture. Not much, just enough to be readable. Once I'm done adding this texture that you see here, I'm going to grab the airbrush, the hard edge one, and just draw in some darker lines to sort of create different shapes of rock down there, some separation between the two of them. I made that a little too light. I do darken it up in a moment. But I'm really just trying to get in some shapes that look like rocks and have some, shadow between each of them so that they don't look like they're just blending together. And then I'm now adding in just a bit more rock that I feel was lost upon painting my various layers. So also, I don't know if you noticed, but I zoom in and zoom out a lot, and that's just so that I can get a clear visual of making sure that like the whole piece is coming together the way that I want it to. The same way that you would with traditional art where you get up and you step back from your painting because you've been so close to it the whole time. You want to do that with your work while you're digitally painting as well. Also, I recommend taking breaks sometimes and giving your eyes a rest and then coming back to your project. So I'm just tapping in a little bit more light color where I feel like it was lacking and just needed a little bit. Sorry for the awkward silence. It's, a lot of this is repetitive and I just don't want to bore you to death by repeating over and over what I'm doing. So for this layer, I chose a more yellow than a green, and I'm really pushing that color at the top to make sure that we understand that the light is really heavy on the top there. And because it is that heavy and that bright on the top, you'll see that I didn't really add it anywhere else. I just kept it really saturated and focused on the top part of that rock. I wanted to add a little bit of other imagery, if you will, to the rock and some variation. So I just drew in some grass. Maybe it's a different type of moss. I don't know, but I wanted variation. And once I got those lines down now, I'm just smudging them with the airbrush again. And there was this nice shadowed area where I felt like if I just put in some grass there, it would really stand out nicely. So I put that there. We're almost done, guys. We've made it this far together. Good job. And I'm just making sure that I'm adding just a little bit of highlight and some color variation so that way it stands out even more and looks natural, right? Not every blade would be the same color perfectly, and there would be light hitting parts of it, but not all of it. I wanted the eye to be drawn there, so I just tapped in some brighter color to make it stand out just a bit, and then I'm smudging some of that away just so it doesn't, you know, it's so it's not distracting. There's a difference between wanting it to draw attention versus be the attention, you know? So here I am adding some, just some light texture to the rock that's still visible. And you can see I'm kind of just making a bunch of squiggly lines. You could try the clay brush. I tried it. I wasn't pleased with the way that it looked. It just looked a little bit too, I don't know. Just like it was just too predictable. And I was really going for, you know, just a loose bit of detail. Once I'm done adding the texture to the rocks, I make it darker because sometimes it's nice to, you know, look at things with different visuals. Here's what I did after when I wasn't filming. So this is directly from the iPad itself. This is the time-lapse video. I did slow it down just so you could see some of the moves a little bit easier. But I just duplicated the rock that I painted, moved it around a couple times, just created some colors in the back, and I used Gaussian blur. Same with the trees in the background, drew some lines, Gaussian blur, rain forest brush for the leaves. I also use Gaussian blur on that, so it's out of focus. I add another layer with the rainforest brush. I believe I also use Gaussian blur on it again. Let's see what happens. Yes. And then I use the cotton brush here, and then I use a blending effect. And I believe I used add, and then I just used the smudge tool, and then I added some light using the luminescence brush, or one of them, and then another luminescence brush to sort of add a magical, whimsical sort of feel to this painting. Added in a little bit of additional colors just to sort of tie in this whimsical feel, and just did some rearranging to create, you know, more rocks. And I darkened up the edges. I also used blur around the edges so that way, similar to like a photograph where there's one point that's really focused. In a moment, you're going to see the finished product. And here it is. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. If you haven't subscribed, please do, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye.